So you're thinking about running, but not sure how to take the first step. My name is Brian Patterson, and I'm here to help. Welcome to Brian's Run Pod. Well, welcome back to Brian's Run Pod. And today is a little bit of a different episode, as basically we're going to go over some of the past interviews and I'm going to take out some of my favourite bits. So the interviews are with Stuart Hayes, an Olympic triathlete, Caitlin Limmer, the founder of the Bearcat Running Club, Wren, a local running coach, and not forgetting Colleen and Jon, who are both keen runners and who are friends of mine. So anyway, let's start with Caitlin, who's founder of the Bearcat Runner Club, and basically how she got the running bug. And she had a really interesting story.
Oh, wow. I got into running. The story is very plain and simple.
Yeah.
I was very ill,
as
you mentioned, and I was given 40 minutes to live, and many people know that story now. A long time ago now, 19 years ago. And as a result of it, my body was a little bit shot. I was told that my bone density was going to be a real issue in my life. Yeah. And in my naivety at that time, I thought, bone density, what does that mean? How can I help myself? And I thought, running, that's what people say, build your bone density. So that is how I literally started. I had a year to try and change my bone density before I was going to have this next scan. And I wanted to prove to this wonderful woman that had saved my life that we could counteract it and that I could make it better. So that's how I started. And, I hated it. I still do. Love, hate. And
ditto.
I think that's a story for many people. And then I fell in love with what it was giving me. So, so that's kind of the moment I laced up my trainers and got on the road really properly.
Now, I know you've said, I know this is sort of jumping about a bit, but I know you said that you trained as an opera singer. I mean, did that help you in any way in terms of what your journey you're about to embark on, or not?
So I think at the time I didn't recognize it, but I totally recognize now that singing and running give you very similar end results in that you get a great big high from singing, using that oxygen, working together. I was in chorus of many operas, and it's discipline, it's camaraderie, it's community, it's working hard towards a goal. So all of those things, I definitely replicate in running. Beyond that, well, there are quite a lot of similarities anyway, but they're the immediate ones I can think of. But obviously opera singers in my day, which was 25 years ago now, were not fit, not into exercise necessarily. I could be making a rather sweeping statement, but in my day, I never saw many people that were really into exercise. And now, of course, I'm sure that actors and opera singers, have to be far more health-minded. And, the stronger we are for everything, for shows or for running 5Ks, the better.
Thanks very much for that, Caitlin, and we'll be hearing from her later in the episode. We also talked to a very keen runner, Colleen, who is a friend of my wife's, and She said she sort of started off by doing quite a lot of gymnastics at school.
Oh, thanks, Brian. I did a lot of sport while I was in school, but not so much with school. A lot of it was, the running especially was outside, but I also did gymnastics while I was kind of a teenager and in secondary school.
Oh, right, okay.
But as far as running goes, I was doing quite a lot of running, but I actually wasn't running on a school team or anything like that. So it was completely outside of school that I did running.
Right. And were you always... were you quite enthusiastic about sport, or is it something that sport has come to you in later life?
Well, I never thought of myself as that good at sport really when I was probably primary school age or anything like that. But I did then become more and more confident by doing a bit of gymnastics. But I never saw myself as one of the really sporty people at school apart from that. So it's as I've, I suppose, got more mature, and the more I got into running, the kind of more I realised how important it would be to me and how much I really, really enjoyed it. So I think for me, it was kind of, I associated sport at school with kind of PE lessons. And for me, that, that wasn't really what motivated me. Let's put it that way.
Thanks very much, Colleen. And let's not forget we had a Olympian on the podcast, and I was extremely grateful that Stuart Hayes, who was part of the 2012 Olympic team, GB Olympic team that is, joined us. And he told us this story about how he got into the sport.
Well, I started off as a swimmer. I used to swim at a place called Hounslow Swimming Club back in sort of the 80s. I was hyperactive. My parents couldn't control him. I was always running around the house. They said we need to take him somewhere that calms him down. Because back in the old days, they didn't have like medication stuff like I do now. It was just like, oh, this kid's got too much energy. What do we do with him? So they took me to the swim squad. And I remember swimming one length. And if I could swim one length, I could join the club. And I did my one length. And then that was it. They said, right, you can come in the mornings and the evenings. So I think I was around 7 or 8 years old. Swimming twice a day, every day for the next like 10 years. And then I got to a point when I was about 13, 14, and I just wasn't growing. I was quite small.
Oh, right.
But at the time I was quite good at running, because at school I was a good runner. I did cross country and stuff like that. Yeah. And then we had a guy in our swim squad called Spencer Smith. And he was world junior champion. And he was about to be world senior champion as well. And I was like, I'd like to have a go at triathlon. So I decided, let's try triathlon. I joined Twickenham Cycling Club. I joined Thames Turbo's Triathlon Club. Yeah. And I was also a member of Ranelagh Harriers and I think Richmond Twickenham. They were like linked together as running clubs. I also trained with that Hounslow running club as well, where Mo Farah trains, and sometimes I go there, be there. At that point, I was like putting all the pieces together, and I did my first triathlon, I think, at Market Bosworth in like early sort of like mid-90s, and then I just went from there.
Thanks for that, Stuart. And we also interviewed a really good friend of mine. In fact, this was one of my first interviews that I did for the podcast. And very exciting, as I was a little nervous and just wanted to know how this might go. As we recorded this just on one microphone. So John tells us about how he got into running.
Yeah, so probably about 10 years ago. So I've always been trying to lose weight ever since I was too heavy or heavier than I should have been. So yeah, about 10 years ago, I'd had lots of gym memberships that I'd have for 6 months, and eventually I'd run out of steam or find excuses of no reason to go. So I thought I'd give running just give it a go, because it's cheap. And you don't need to, you don't need a membership. You can do it anywhere. And I can remember my first, I had run at school. Obviously in sport you run as well, but I can remember my first sort of proper run, and it was probably only a mile. I think it was about a mile, and about 2/3 of the way through it, I tripped over a bit of raised pavement and scraped a load of skin off my hand. And then I got back and I was actually sick. I was that unfit. So about 10-ish years ago, but bizarrely about a week later, I thought actually I enjoyed that. And it was, what I found is that quite quickly, I was able to, get up to 5K pretty easily. And then about a year after that, I did a half marathon. I've never done a full marathon, but I've done about 4 or 5 half marathons since, and various other runs. So that's how I got into running. Trying to lose weight. That was really the main motivator. Yeah.
So I noticed that you said something about the kind of the benefits. Did you the health benefits? Because I know that Alice, my daughter, who's running, trying to get fit but she noticed that she can sort of run to the bus without getting out of breath. Did you kind of get those kind of things?
Yeah, and just natural, just running up the stairs. Even just things like sweating less. You just have a natural level of fitness that it helps with. And I've always had sort of various smart watches and things like that testing your resting heart rate. And it definitely, if I'm in a good, run of running, my natural fitness is a lot better.
Thanks very much, John. Not only have we had runners and an Olympian, but also you've had a racing driver turned commentator. And I wanted to have Tom Gaymor on, who works for Sky Sports and does commentating for IndyCar. And he has a really interesting story about his rehabilitation from a career-wrecking back injury. And here he talks about how he got into motorsport.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I love being active, and it wasn't until I got a bit older and realised that we all learn in different ways. But I'm a very sort of kinesthetic learner, very visual learner, and that lent itself to sort of being out and about. I was always looking out the window and longing for break time and PE and games. And then when the rain came, that frustration of having to play hangman and being forced into not leaving the classroom was my pet hate. So, I loved being active as a young kid. And, I'm 41 now, but even when I was younger, we had computers and, the Sega Mega Drives and the Super Nintendos of the day and the Commodore Amiga. Who's old enough to remember what a Commodore Amiga is? But, I didn't really have any games consoles. I was always outside and from a young age, I always had a bat in my hand, loved cricket, loved rugby. And then as I got a bit older, motorsports came into my life as well.
What's got you interested, just to segue into that, what got you into it? Because into motorsports? Because I know I was listening to a podcast with Scott Speed, and he said his dad was a massive F1 fan and loved Schumacher. And was there someone in your family who was really mad about motorsport or Formula One? Or
well, do you know what? The whole tie into sport, I was very fortunate. My granddad was a wonderful swimmer, and he loved open water swimming, and tried to swim the channel, was always up at Lake Windermere, was always out, he was swimming in his 80s. Wow. And he was a doctor. He was the honorary RFU doctor, England rugby doctor as well. So I grew up around that professional sporting environment, and I used to get picked up from school and sometimes go to Twickenham and watch the England team train, Captain's Day and that kind of stuff. So I had that, and you're probably wondering what the link is, but he also had a very good connection, a chap called David Price, who we've just lost actually 14 weeks ago. David was a big name in the motorsport world. He ran Brabham for Bernie. He was instrumental when it came to success at Le Mans for various different manufacturers, and had his time at Benetton and did various other things in the sport. And I was invited along with my granddad to go and visit David at the sort of tender age of 10. And I never looked back, because, we all have, or the majority of us had the opportunity to play those grassroots all those sports at a grassroots level that I mentioned, football, cricket, rugby. But motorsport isn't something that many people come across. And I was very fortunate to have that experience. And from that day on, just the smell, the sight, the sound, it was so special that it was a dream of mine from that moment to try and progress.
Thanks very much, Tom. And we'll be hearing from Tom later on in the episode. I was really keen to get a local running coach onto the podcast. So I spoke to Andrew Wren, who is a local running coach. And here he talks about the 5 elements of training.
There are 5 facets of running fitness. I'm going to forget one. It's going to be brilliant. Coordination, flexibility, speed, strength, endurance.
Right. Okay.
So endurance is the one that all of my athletes are training. There's absolutely no question about that. Obviously, I care about it a lot, but it's like everyone who comes to me wants to train their endurance. Flexibility, separate. But speed and strength, 2 of the 5, right? Now, people might not necessarily think that speed is in fact, a lot of people will try and self-deprecate themselves through the flaw when I speak to them. Oh, I'm not very fast. No, I'm very slow. I'm not. And I think people are overly defensive about that, because a large makeup of your muscle fibers will be fast twitch muscle fibers.
Mm-hmm.
So learning to actually use those muscle fibers is going to be extremely useful for every type of runner. Otherwise, you're only utilizing a proportion, whatever proportion that is. Some people will have more slow twitch, some people will have more fast twitch, etc. But from a fundamental perspective, it's a more rounded way of using your muscle fibers. So that's on the micro level. But on a macro level, the way that you move your legs when you do speed work or sprint work or tempo intervals, whatever they are, is slightly different to the way that you use your legs and your body when you do your long runs. So if you're a new runner, especially beginners, actually this is especially relevant to beginners, if you're a brand new runner and you're just plowing the same movement through your body, you're using your calves, you're likely to be massively overusing your calves, in all honesty. Your calves, your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, using them in exactly the same way over and over and over and over again. That's the kind of thing that can cause issues with your body. Whereas if you start to do some slightly different movements, by which I mean either running super fast or running a little bit faster, it's going to change the way that you use your body, meaning that you're not just making exactly the same movement each time. Like, for example, like if you were going to the gym and you were going to train arms, you wouldn't just do the same exercise for an hour, right? You wouldn't just sit there and do sort of bicep curls for the same hour. And there's, a similar number of muscles in the arm as there is in the leg.
Yeah.
So it's about utilizing the body in slightly different ways so that people don't get issues.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Going back to one of Caitlin's, here she talks about the benefits of mental health that running provides.
You know what? I was looking and over our thoughts on this podcast and just earlier, and I think you said something about what are the mental health benefits?
Yeah.
And I think that was quite an interesting one. It got me thinking, how the benefits of running have been different for me over the years. And, I started running late, so I was in my 30s. The benefits then, I was a young mum. I had to do it really early in the morning. The benefits were different. They helped me cope with just being a mum. And keeping me strong and happy and fit. Then it became sort of the challenge, marathon after marathon after marathon, and wow, and empowering. And, the children got older and it running gave me this confidence, more of a confidence. And now I use running to spend time with my favorite people. I use running, menopause, but I'm very lucky. I don't have major issues with that. But yes, bones and joints, really thinking, I can feel the difference in my body. Therefore, I need to keep doing this. I need to keep oiling the cogs.
Yeah.
And, thinking about that, right where I started, thinking about that bone density again, because that is all changing age.
Especially 51. For women,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's not only that, with the menopause, of course, we need to do these things for so many other reasons. And, I don't know, I care for a couple of relations, and for me, it's essential for my sanity. Absolutely. Well, it's, that's mental health again. But, when you get difficult, challenging times, caring for various people, it becomes, it's like one's savior in many ways, isn't it? It's, it's hard, and people, it never gets any easier to get out of that front door, though. That's the fascinating thing to me.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. And I also wanted to get something else out of Caitlin's interview. Just wanted to know, how did she actually start the Bearcat Running Club?
Well, it came about. I'll tell you exactly how it came about. I'd been I had group after group each week of people, or not each week, each day, of more and more people that I was sort of helping with running. We turned up one day at Gunnersbury 10K, and there were loads of us. And one of my runners won the female event, which was amazing. And we all went to the pub afterwards, and people said, "We want to be part of something, Caitlin. People keep saying, 'Who do you run for?' And we can only just point at you and go, 'Yeah, it's that loud ginger bird over there. That's who we run for. Yeah. We run for her.'" And they said, "We want to be part of something." And and again, I speak about this, and the words "running club" fill me with fear, and and not that they aren't brilliant, but there's a terrible assumption that I even myself make about running clubs. And I thought, well, I don't want to set up a running club. I've avoided that kind of thing all my life, really. Or I just thought they weren't for me. But of course, I thought, well, hang on, I could set up something a little bit different that's not just about league tables and competition. And please don't get me wrong, I have the utmost respect for that area. But it wasn't my forte. Still isn't my forte. Isn't my passion. My passion is the everyman. It's teaching the person, I would say it's the sort of the London Marathon of running clubs, for everyone. For the person that wants to, just do their first marathon and walk it. For the person that still wants to kill 3.5 hours. Yeah, we've got that as well. But it is, I wanted to sort of fill a possible gap I saw in the market. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't as clever as that. I wasn't thinking that specifically. I just thought, I want to provide an environment that was nurturing.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. Well, let's go back to our Olympian, who had a really extraordinary story when I interviewed Stuart Hayes. He told us a story about how he headbutted a deer in Richmond Park. Over to you, Stuart.
Yes, I did. I was out cycling Richmond Park, and I was going down one of the hills, and I wasn't going that fast because usually, I'm not gonna lie, I trained there as professional. Yeah. At some point, I would have done some speeding, but I wasn't actually speeding this time. And I went down, and a deer literally ran across the road and full blast into me, and it just sent me flying.
I landed completely side on.
Yeah, side eye just came out. So I think it was being chased by a dog or something, and it just happened.
Right.
You know, when you see something coming, and I thought, because I know that I couldn't slam on my brakes because I'd crash anyway, so I thought I'd just try and like dodge it. Like I headbutted the deer.
Oh no!
Back eyes, but then I tried to unclip, and as I unclipped, I slammed my foot into the ground, and then my pelvic, my leg got pushed up into my pelvis, which shattered the hip. Usually it's the ball and socket that shatters, but this time it's the actual, like the main hip. And but luckily it shattered all in one piece, so I didn't need an operation. I just had to go around in a wheelchair for 12 weeks.
All right. And your wife Michelle was with you, is that right?
She wasn't with me. She came and pick me up because someone said I got kicked by the deer and I was on the floor. I was down there for 2 hours, and then someone turned up and said, "Oh, you can't have broken your hip. You'll be screaming." And I went, "Yeah, okay, well," got into the ambulance. They sort of lifted me into the ambulance. I think it's because it shattered all in one piece. That's why I was in so much pain. Right. And then they went to the hospital and they scanned it and said, "Oh yeah, it's shattered." And then I stayed the night, and the next day the doctors came in and said, like 50-50, would you like an operation? I went, "Oh, am I supposed to like flip a coin here or something?" So I had a doctor as a friend, and I said to the doctor guy, I said, "This is the situation in, what would you do?" And he said, "Ask the guy, if this was you, what would you do? If this was one of your children?" And he said, "I would leave it for a couple of weeks and see how it heals." So I left it for a couple of weeks. I went back there. And the funny thing was, when I went back there, I wasn't booked in. They'd like forgotten about me. And because I was on paper, a lady came up to me and goes, "Oh, you're the guy that got hit by the deer." And I went, "Yeah, I'm here for like my x-ray to see if I need an operation or not." And she goes, "Oh, I'll quickly make a phone call." And then they made a little phone call and they x-rayed me and I was fine and it just healed. And I was in a wheelchair for 12 weeks and Michelle had to push me around like Little Britain, down that was an experience.
You didn't secretly.
And it wasn't that. The thing was, it was just like, it's a boredom really. It's quite hard to sit there and basically do nothing, just watch television, just wait. And also getting around was difficult as well. Like going to the toilet in the night was really hard. And in the bath, I had to put like a little plate. So I'd sit on like a little chair and I showered myself and stuff like that. So it was challenging. And I could crutch, but the problem was I thought if I fall over and bang it again from crutching, because when you crutch and it's wet, it's very slippery. And also they teach you to crutch up the stairs, which I thought was ridiculous. So I used to sort of sit on my bum and sort of pull myself up the stairs. There's no way I'm crutching up the stairs, because if I fell back, that'd be it. I'd be back to A&E again. So yeah, it was an experience for sure.
Did you swim? Again. Did you do some swimming?
Eventually, I got to a point where I could swim. I also did this one on the hand one, which is good. I did upper body weight. So about 2 weeks, I was in the gym training, and then after about a month, I could swim.
Thanks very much, Stuart. That was really enlightening. Well, I think the last little sort of piece or segment, whatever you might want to call it, is from Tom Gaymor. And I just wanted to ask him how he became a motor racing commentator. So he's very much our very own Murray Walker. Murray Walker, by the way, for those who don't know, was a very, very famous commentator for the BBC over here in the UK. Anyway, over to you, Tom.
I walked away from the sport because seeing my friends still doing what it was that I wanted to do was just too raw. It was just too hard. And it's almost like a breakup. You're still very much in love with somebody, but they're not in love with you, and away they go on another journey. And that was the sport for me. It was too raw. And so I went and worked with Getty Images for a bit, and then, I had the realization that know your lane in life, and also don't walk too far away from what it is that you know. And so I went back to the sport and found a niche in coaching and working with younger drivers, and I worked with the national governing body and did various different things around coaching qualifications. But bubbling away in the background was the commentary. So TV gave me a lifeline, and it's the TV that's grown and grown and grown over the last sort of 10 or so years. And I've been incredibly fortunate enough to sort of forge a career in TV and broadcasting. No one teaches you how to do it. You either sink or swim. Everybody tells you when they don't like you and when you've made a mistake, but no one pats you on the back when you've done a good job, especially in today's day and age of social media.
Yes.
And it, you know, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And it gives me that opportunity to be involved in a sport that I fell in love with as a 10-year-old child. And my goal was always to get to Formula One. I've got to Formula One now, albeit with a microphone in my hand and not a steering wheel. So it's a funny lesson as to, you know, life is a journey, and you never quite know where you're going to end up, how you're going to end up. But, you know, for me, I've got to where I wanted to get to, just in a different guise.
Thanks very much, Tom. And that's it. I just want to say a really big thank you to Stuart, Caitlin, Andrew, Colleen, and John for agreeing to come on this little podcast of mine. So I just wanted to say, big thanks. Hope you enjoyed this episode. There will be links in the show notes where you can go back to each of the episodes. That's it for another episode, and looking forward to speaking to you next week with some beginner hints and tips about running. I just want to let you know that you can follow me on X, or what was known as Twitter, at Brian's Run Pod. I have just recently set up a Facebook page which is called Brian's Run Pod, and I am on Instagram at Brian's Run Pod. Also, my website is www.briansrunpod.co.uk, where you can get show notes, or on whatever podcasting app you are listening to the show. Plus, all my episodes have chapter markers if you need to get to different segments of the show. Plus, leave a review, as it will help others find this podcast. Music is Happy Day by Stock Audio, not forgetting artwork by Alice Patterson. Till next week, thanks again for listening.